Who hasn't heard of Queen Elizabeth II? Her Royal Highness is the seemingly immortal, longest reigning monarch of the United Kingdom, who has been served by 14 prime ministers so far, and has ruled for a whopping 68 years, and counting. So, if this is the first time that you've heard of her, then boy are you in for a treat. Although millions of words have been written about the Queen, few people know the notoriously private lady behind the crown, and that makes her all the more fascinating. Because all things said and done, the Queen is not your typical 94-year-old. In honour of Her Majesty, let's have a look at some of the things you might not have known about this royal legend, and the perks of being the Queen. YouCurious? Discover more. Know more. She's the world's largest landowner. Proud of having the biggest backyard in the neighbourhood? Think again. The Queen holds the title to roughly 6.6 billion acres of land throughout the world. If you're having trouble imagining, that's about 1/6 of the land on the entire planet, and includes Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Jamaica, the Bahamas, and several other Caribbean islands, as part of a group called the Commonwealth Realm. Moreover, in the United Kingdom alone, the Queen's real estate holds more than $16 billion in property. This includes many of the royal family's residences, like Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, and Windsor Castle. Her handbag isn't just for the usual. You don't really need to drag a purse along when you have staff ready to serve you at a moment's notice, now do you? So, what's the Queen's handbag for? Well, apart from carrying makeup, treats for her much-beloved corgis, a crossword puzzle in case she has time to kill, a penknife, a diary, and a small camera to take pictures with visiting presidents and other VIPs, the Queen's handbag also serves a rather peculiar purpose. She uses it to signal her staff. Yep, you heard that right. Her Majesty moves her handbag from one arm to the other as a signal to her staff when she's ready to wrap up a conversation or a social event. A member of her team then assists in extracting the Queen from the conversation or event, in the most regal way possible, so as not to offend anyone. She pays the Poet Laureate in bottles of sherry. The Poet Laureate of the United Kingdom is an exceptional poet and playwright who is expected to write verse for significant national occasions, and is a part of the British royal staff. Ever since the reign of Charles I in 1630, a royal tradition to pay the Poet Laureate with a butt of sack, which essentially means a barrel of wine, has been followed by the royal estate, and continues to this day under the reign of the Queen. From 1984, a butt of sack was replaced by 720 bottles of sherry, which has been given by the Queen to all the Poet Laureates appointed every 10 years under her reign, along with an honorarium of £5,750 per year. She technically owns all the swans, dolphins, sturgeons, and whales in the UK. You'd better believe it, the Queen really does own all the swans in the United Kingdom. She even has a team row through the River Thames in London to count them, and in 2018 they counted 108 baby swans. She can also lay claim to any fishes royal which dwell in British waters, which includes any dolphins, sturgeons, and whales as well. This is due to a still valid statute from the reign of King Edward II in 1324, which states that most aquatic creatures are claimed on behalf of the Crown. She survived 2 attempts on her life. In 1981, inspired by the famous assassination of John Lennon, which took place just a few months before, and attempts on the lives of Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II, a 17-year-old named Marcus Sargent fired a series of shots towards the Queen as she was leading a royal procession on horseback toward Buckingham Palace. As luck would have it though, Sargent was unable to buy live bullets in the United Kingdom, and the shots fired turned out to be blanks. A year later, in 1982, a man named Michael Fagan scaled the Buckingham Palace's 14-foot-high barbed wire walls, shimmied up a drain pipe, and sneaked into the Queen's bedroom. He then strangely asked the Queen for some cigarettes, which were brought in by a maid, before he was finally apprehended by 2 policemen on palace duty. Indeed, Lady Luck seems to favour Her Royal Highness, but funnily enough, she's had her share of weird experiences as well. She created her own breed of dogs. The Queen has owned over 30 corgis in her lifetime, and her love for these little fluff balls is famous throughout the world. But did you know that she is responsible for a new breed of adorable canines altogether? You heard that right. The royal family owns Dorgies, which were first born when the Queen's corgi mated with a dachshund belonging to her sister, Princess Margaret. The royal dogs have their own room, and their food is specially prepared by a chef. But the Queen feeds them personally at 5 p.m. sharp every day and walks them herself. She served in World War II. Before donning her trademark brightly coloured dresses, coats and matching hats, Queen Elizabeth sported something quite different: a military uniform. In 1945, at the young age of just 18, when she was a princess, she joined the women's branch of the British Army during the Second World War as a truck driver and mechanic. Till today, the Queen remains the only living head of state to have served in World War II, and the only female member of the royal family to have enlisted in the military. She paid for her wedding dress using war ration coupons. Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip tied the knot in 1947, when the United Kingdom was still recovering from World War II and had rationing measures in place. No one, not even the future Queen, was exempt from these measures, and had to use ration coupons to pay for everything. Princess Elizabeth used her own saved-up war coupons, plus an extra 200 coupons from the government, to pay for her wedding dress. But make no mistake, the dress was extremely elegant. It was made of ivory Duchess silk, encrusted with 10,000 imported seed pearls, took 6 months to make, and sported a 13-foot train. She can drive without a license. In 2003, when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Prince Abdullah, visited the Queen in her castle in Scotland, the Queen offered him a tour of her estate after lunch. At a time when women were not allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, to Abdullah's utter surprise, the Queen herself climbed into the driver's seat, turned the ignition on, and drove off. That's right, the Queen's military-grade driving skills are the real deal. And because Britain officially issues driver's licenses in her name, the Queen herself doesn't have to pull out any ID if she gets pulled over while she's taking VIPs around for a spin in one of her Range Rovers. She has 2 birthdays. The Queen was born on the 21st of April 1926, but English weather made it so that April was deemed too cold for an official celebration. So, the Queen celebrates her birthday twice a year, once when she was born, and another, which is usually on the second Saturday of June. She doesn't need a passport to travel. The Queen is the most well-travelled head of state in the world, having visited more than 115 countries and 270 official state visits during her reign. So it would seem a little unnecessary for her to flash her passport every time she hops on a plane. Well, guess what? She doesn't have to. But it's not just because she's so obviously identifiable, especially with those brightly coloured ensembles and matching hats she often wears, but because the Queen is sort of a walking passport herself. She doesn't have to pay taxes, but chooses to. Any of us would jump at the opportunity to save some cash if we were given the chance to not pay taxes. Although one royal was given that chance, she waived her right to avoid taxes. Queen Elizabeth is not legally obligated to pay tax. However, she voluntarily began paying income and capital gains tax in 1992. Not only that, she also pays council tax, i.e. tax for local council services, which includes maintenance, libraries and education services, and police and fire services, among others, on all 4 of her properties, namely the Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Sandringham Estate and Balmoral Estate. History is man's attempt to understand himself. As long as humanity has roamed the face of the earth, people have done things which have never ceased to amaze us. This is the reason why history is full of facts and mysteries hiding in plain sight, some of which can even challenge things that we thought we were sure of. From Genghis Khan's tomb and Damascus steel to clever World War II tactics by the British and Hitler's wealth, let's have a look at 10 fragments from history you'll be surprised to hear. YouCurious? Discover more. Know more. 1. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian. It's understandable to assume that one of the most popular monarchs of Egypt was, well, Egyptian. But that's not the case. Cleopatra is often depicted in hieroglyphs as a dusky, sharp-nosed queen of exquisite beauty that was born in Egypt, but traces of her family originate from Macedonian Greece. Apparently, she was a member of a long line of Greek-speaking rulers established by Ptolemy after the death of Alexander the Great, and embraced many of her country's ancient customs. For example, she was the only Ptolemaic ruler to learn the ancient Egyptian language, which no other Greek ruler before her had done. 2. No one knows the location of Genghis Khan's tomb. Genghis Khan was the founder and first emperor of the vast Mongol Empire, which covered most of Eurasia during the 13th and 14th centuries. It is surprising to know that although he was one of the greatest conquerors the world has ever known, Genghis Khan instructed that he be buried without any markings. According to legend, a grieving army carried his body, killing anyone en route so as to maintain the secrecy of the path to his grave. After burying him, they rode 1,000 horses over his grave, destroying any remaining traces. It was also said that Genghis Khan's soldiers later killed themselves, leaving no trace for anyone to ever find his grave. 800 years later, the Mongol warlord still rests in peace. 3. Samurais were legally allowed to kill people who disrespected them. Kirisute gomen is an old Japanese expression which translates as the authorization to cut and leave. In feudal Japan, samurai had the right of kirisute gomen and were legally allowed to strike anyone of a lower class with their sword, should they compromise their honor in any way, which could even be as simple as insulting them. The samurai who invoked this right was required to notify the nearest government officer of his actions and give his version of the facts, along with a witness to prove that his action was justified. If the samurai could not prove the legitimacy of his actions, severe punishment, even death by seppuku, could be expected to follow, where the samurai would be required to stab himself and cut his belly open to death as capital punishment. His family would also suffer, as they would be stripped of their property, wealth, and titles. 4. Hitler was a billionaire. Spurred by poverty in his adolescent life, Hitler was determined to amass a fortune when he rose to a position of power. While much of his wealth came from siphoning off government money and donations from corporations, he also undertook creative schemes. One, for example, is that after becoming the Chancellor of Germany, Hitler ordered the government to buy copies of his book Mein Kampf to give as state wedding gifts to newlyweds, and pocketed hefty royalties amounting to around $170 million in today's money. Moreover, he licensed his image to the German government and got a cut of the earnings whenever his image was printed on any government property, like stamps, currency, and propaganda flyers. Also, Hitler refused to pay any income tax. All of this led his wealth ballooning to about $5 billion in today's money. 5. Chess was invented in India. Chess is one of the most popular strategy board games that we've ever known. But how did it come about? Played by millions of people worldwide, chess is believed to be derived from the Indian game of chaturanga sometime before the 7th century. Chaturanga itself was born from a battle formation mentioned in the epic Mahabharata and is regarded as the earliest precursor of all chess variants across the world because of two distinct features. Different pieces had different powers, and victory or defeat was based on one piece, the king. In fact, East Asian variations of chess such as Xiangqi, Jangi, and Shogi are all likely descendants of chaturanga as well. 6. No one knows the secret of making Damascus steel. Damascus blades were first made in the Middle East from Wootz steel that was imported from southern India and Sri Lanka. They were used by Arab warriors during the Crusades of the 11th century, when the Western Europeans witnessed the unequivocal sharpness of the blades in action. The ferocity of those Arab warriors with their unique blades gave rise to the legends which spread throughout the Middle East and Europe. Known for its distinctive patterns reminiscent of flowing water, Damascus steel was famous because it maintained a keen edge, yet was hard and flexible. weapons made from Damascus steel were vastly superior to weapons made from iron. A study revealed that nanowires and carbon nanotubes were present in a Damascus blade, which may account for its strength. Plant fiber was believed to have been added when the steel was made, which naturally resulted in nanotubes within the steel that made it flexible and strong. Sadly, the production of Damascus blades ceased by around 1750, when techniques for making wootz steel were lost. Since then, no one has been able to replicate the original method of making it, although a great deal of reverse engineering has been attempted. 7. George Washington had a ring of spies. George Washington wasn't only the first president of the United States of America, he was also America's first spy master. Known as Agent 711 in the Culper spy ring organised by Major Benjamin Talmadge and often headed by George Washington himself, there were several networks of spies operating in close-knit circles and far-reaching societies. The Culper spy ring's task was to provide Washington information on British Army operations. The ring emerged as one of the most successful and best-known operations of the era. The intel supplied by the ring averted surprise attacks planned on the Navy, plans to counterfeit American currency, and plans to capture the highly prized West Point fort, among others. 8. President Roosevelt used a private train platform. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who held office from 1933 to 1945, was paralyzed from the waist down with polio. Fearing that such a disability would have been considered as a disqualification from high office, he did everything he could to keep descriptions and images of his wheelchair out of the press. Roosevelt even used an existing private train terminal under the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York to his advantage. He would frequently be transported in his bulletproof, armor-plated Pierce Arrow limousine into his own train car, which would pull into Grand Central on track 61. The limousine would then drive directly out onto the platform. That train car has supposedly been sitting on track 61 since 1945, until recently. 9. King Farouk of Egypt was a pickpocket. King Farouk I ruled Egypt from 1936 to 1952, a reign marked by corruption, incompetence, and weirdness. Among other things, the king was a literal kleptomaniac who could not resist stealing things and picking people's pockets. He actually took pickpocketing lessons, and his victims included Winston Churchill, whom Farouk invited to a dinner during World War II. At the meal, Churchill discovered that his pocket watch, a family heirloom that was gifted by Queen Anne to his ancestor John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, had gone missing. After an outcry and search, Farouk, who had been seated next to Churchill, sheepishly turned it in, claiming to have found it. 10. British intelligence invented a fake man to trick the Nazis. Somewhat literally out of a spy movie, Operation Mincemeat was a tactical British operation during the Second World War, which helped the British to invade Sicily. The operation was based on the Trout Memo, a document on enemy deception written by the assistant of Britain's Director of Naval Intelligence, who was also none other than the creator of the iconic James Bond, Ian Fleming. During the operation, the British government found the cadaver of a homeless man named Glendore Michael, who had died by ingesting rat poison. They disguised him as a fictional naval officer named William Martin and allowed his body to wash ashore in Spain, where the Germans were stationed, along with a briefcase of documents showing a planned invasion of Greece by the British. The decoy managed to throw off Axis powers about Allied invasion plans, as the Germans thought that the British were planning to invade Greece, and the British managed to invade Sicily successfully. Know any surprising historical facts yourself? Leave them in the comments below. Until next time, keep watching YouCurious. Discover more, know more.